Hi everyone, Wayne Williams here from Profunda Analytics. In part one of this video series, I introduced you to three core interfaces: pivot analysis, trend analysis, and change analysis. Each of these interfaces was universal in that they can be applied to every data set, and they are also independent, which means they can be used on their own, i.e. as entry points into the system. Today, I'm going to show you secondary interfaces. These are compare analysis, custom analysis, and details. These interfaces are dependent on other interfaces for their data and/or context. Let's begin by looking at the compare analysis. This tool compares one dataset to another. As such, it is currently dependent on the pivot analysis because only the pivot analysis allows us to easily reference two datasets. Let me show you what I mean. Add column doctor. Change measure visits per patient. As requested, this pivot table now shows visits per patient per doctor. If you look at row 1, you can see that Dr. Bon Jovi sees his patients on an average of 2.38 times during the most recent year. If you look down here at row 11, you can see that Dr. Paul McCartney sees his patients on an average of only 1.45 times per year. That's quite a difference, and since visits per patient has a large impact on revenue, we'd like to know why there's such a difference. To find this out, we simply do the following. Compare row 1 with 11. As you can see, this dashboard compares Dr. Bon Jovi in purple to Dr. McCartney in beige across multiple dimensions. Now let's see where they differ. To start with, you can see that Bon Jovi's patients tend to be in the older age groups of 65 to 84 and 85 plus, whereas Dr. McCartney's patients are younger in the 0 to 18 and 19 to 44 groups. Also, Bon Jovi tends to do almost all of his work in the main department, while McCartney has roughly 30% of his work in the optical department. Finally, Bon Jovi appears to do most of his work at the Olympus Group location, whereas Dr. McCartney does most of his work at the Atlantis Group location. I can't emphasize enough how revealing this type of comparison can be. We do a lot of work with statistical variances and AI routines, yet, in our view, this kind of simple comparison is one of the most efficient, cost-effective methods of data analysis. If you're dealing with a situation of, say, one product line outperforming another product line, or one sales team outperforming another, this kind of comparison will tell you where to look quicker than any other method. With Profunda Voice 2.0, you can also perform the next step in the analysis in only seconds, like this. Go back. Change column age. Remember how one of the big differences between the two doctors was age? To see how much this impacts visits per patient, we simply change the pivot table to look at age groups instead of doctors. Right away, we can see that there is a strong correlation between age and visits per patient. Namely, older patients tend to visit their doctors more, whereas younger patients tend to visit less. This alone may explain the differences we are seeing between Bon Jovi and McCartney, but we can just as easily assess some of the other differences. Change column location group. If you recall, Bon Jovi did most of his work out of the Olympus location group, while McCartney did most of his out of the Atlantis location group. But as you can see, there is not much difference in visits per patient between these two location groups. What about departments? Change column department. Again, we see quite a substantial difference between the visits per patient values for the main department versus the optical department. If these differences are of interest to us, we can start a new analysis loop by comparing row 1, the main department, to row 2, the optical department. We won't do this now because this video is already longer than intended, but the main point is that even with this secondary dependent comparison interface, we can learn so much about our data with just a few verbal commands. In part 3 of this video series, we're going to look at a few other secondary interfaces that also provide great value.